Hello. In this video I'm going to look at the local adjustment tools in Lightroom 6 and Silkypix Developer Studio 7 Pro. I'm going to look at 4 tools in Lightroom. These are the radial filter, the graduated filter, the spot removal tool, and the adjustment brush. In Silkypix, I'm going to look at 3 tools. The partial correction tool, which has 2 of them within it, which is the circular correction filter and the gradual correction filter. And I'm going to look at the spotting tools. I'll start in Lightroom. I want to bring the highlights down in this stained glass window and in these windows on the right. In the previous video I used a radial filter. I drew out an area and I pulled the highlights down. And I did a similar thing with the windows at the side. Put down an area, draw down the highlights. Now the problem with this sort of approach, and I had this in the first video, was that fitting an oval to an area which isn't an oval may not give you a very good result, because the effect can take place. I've drawn the highlights down here in this window area, but in fact it got pulled down on this edge as well. Now I can pull that in, but again it's not necessarily fitting very well down at the bottom corner there. So I'm going to delete the effects that I've just put on and try this in a different way. I'm going to use the adjustment brush. Now unfortunately you can't see this, there's a bit of a technology problem here, but you'll be able to see the results of what I do. I've got a circular tool here and I'm just drawing around with it. Well, let me just check something first. I'll turn the auto mask off, so as I paint, it's not being clever about where it goes, just wherever I move the cursor it's painting the whole lot. We'll see the auto mask working in just a moment. So for now I've selected that stained glass window at the end, and as before I can pull the highlights down. Not a lot of difference from what I did with the radial filter. Now I'm going to use the adjustment brush over here on the right, and I'm going to have a new one of these pins, and there I go, and it's selecting where this effect is going to take place, or it would have done. I'm just going to delete that if I had turned on the auto mask. So let's try that again now and see the different effect. There we are, it's being more intelligent about it now, and I've just picked the area that I actually want to operate on. And now I can pull the highlights down just in that area. And in these local areas, whether I'm using the adjustment brush or one of these radial filters, there are various things I can change, like the white balance, the exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, clarity, saturation, sharpness, noise, moire, defringe, and colour. I can paint a colour in there. So that's a way of doing it in Lightroom that lets me be more precise about the areas where I want to have an effect. If we now go over to Silkypix, we have, let's try it first with one of these circular filters, and with the bright area you can see where it's going to have its effect, so I'll make it bigger and that's similar to what I did in Lightroom. I'll turn the light down so it's not having any effect now. So what I want to do is to make this stained glass window easier to see. I want to pull the highlights down. Unfortunately, I can't, because highlights isn't in the list of things that I can do anything with. I can change the hue, the saturation, the brightness of it, the lightness of it, and the contrast. I can't pull the highlights down. Now if I pull the lightness down, I have this side effects problem a bit worse than in Lightroom, because when I'm pulling highlights down, it doesn't affect these other areas like the stone within which the windows sit. It doesn't really affect that so much in Lightroom, because I'm pulling highlights down. Here, because I'm pulling the overall brightness down, everything inside that area gets affected. So it's actually rather difficult to produce the effect that I want. In fact, I can't. Similarly with the windows over here, I have a similar problem, that the area that's affected, if I pull the lightness down, again doesn't marry up with the edge, but unlike with Lightroom where I was just pulling the highlights down, it is going to affect the outside more, that darker area on the outside. Now I'd like to use the equivalent of the adjustment brush, where I can be more accurate about where I place this area. Unfortunately, Silkypix doesn't have the equivalent of an adjustment brush. So I think that Silkypix is rather more limited than Lightroom when it comes to these circular and, well, for the circular filters, we'll look at graduated filters next. Here we are back in Lightroom with an image which is dark at the bottom. I want to lighten that up. So I'm going to put down a graduated filter, and I'll have that affect the exposure. Now at the moment it's making it lighter at the top, so I'll swivel it around, and now I've got the effect that I wanted, with the lighter half of the image brighter than it was. And in that area I can alter the other things that we talked about before, like the white balance and the contrast and so on. Let's look at the equivalent in Silkypix, and it really is very similar to do. I put down one of these gradual correction filters, turn it around, spread it out a bit, move it down, job done. And in both cases you can alter the amount of feathering between the area that's affected and the area that isn't by making the distance larger between the central area and the outsides. But as before, it's more limited in Silkypix as to what I can affect. I can affect the one thing I didn't mention before, and I can do this in Lightroom as well, but I can affect the the white balance in the selected area. And this is one of the things that Silkypix makes rather easier to do, because instead of having two sliders to deal with, temperature and tint, and having to try and work out what combination of them to use, you can use this colour palette at the bottom, and it's much more easy to find a suitable colour. So that's graduated filters. Let's go back to Lightroom now. And I now want to try and remove this piece of rope, I think it is, hanging from the back of the wagon. And to do this, I'm going to use the spot removal tool. Now what I've got here is two concentric circles. This is like the ones with the adjustment brush that I couldn't show on screen. You've got two concentric circles. The effect takes place inside the inner one, and the effect reduces between the inner one and the outer one, and stops having any effect on the outside of the outer circle. You can alter the distance between those two circles if you press the right button, which isn't that one, and if I can find the right one to press, there we are. Now I'm making the feathering area much smaller, and now that's no feathering at all. And what I'm going to do is to zoom in a bit and make this smaller, and I just want to get a sharp edge here. I don't want any feathering, because if I was using feathering here it wouldn't look right. So now what's happening is it's picking up from this area and putting it down in this area with no feathering, so I can get it pretty accurately going straight across like that. Now I'm going to turn the feathering on, because if you use no feathering it looks pretty wrong most of the time. So I'm now going to make the feathering quite large in relation to the circle, and I'll make the circle larger again, and I'll zoom out a bit and start putting some of these circles down. I'll make that one a bit smaller to begin with, and I'll have that from over there perhaps, and I can have a bigger one now probably, and I'll have another one down here, and it's taking it from over here for some reason, I don't know why, so I'll drag that back. Oops. And oh, that did nicely, and there's another one there. You get the idea. It's okay for simple jobs like this. For complicated cloning you really need to use something probably like Lightroom or PaintShop Pro. It's probably got better tools for it, but for simple jobs like this, Lightroom will do the business, and we have got rid of that piece of rope now. Let's try doing that in Silkypix. Which makes it much easier to zoom in, incidentally. There's just a nice slider you can use. So I'm going to choose the spotting tool. Now what's happening here is that it's showing us an area down here. This is as large as I can get this area. I can make it smaller, but a lot smaller, but I can't make it any larger. And so I'm going to have to move this now, so I can move that so I can see what I'm doing. So I'm now going to operate up here. Now I've got two circles. I'm pulling the right hand one around, and where it's coming from is over on the left. This is very much like in Lightroom, so I've now got it coming from the opposite side, and I now want to I now want to go up here and choose what they call a wide pen. This is, I think, a pen that doesn't have much feathering. So if I make this a bit smaller, and I'll try doing the first one like I did in Lightroom. Now, in Lightroom, when I put something down, let me just go back and look at this. In Lightroom, when I put something down, I can move where it's coming from, and I can move where it's going to after the event. So all of these I can move around afterwards. In Silkypix, once I've put something down, that's it. It's painted those pixels onto there, and that's where they'll stay. so I can't change it afterwards unless I work backwards undoing things. So I'm going to put one there. Now it's not actually quite far enough up, and I suppose I need to make that a bit smaller perhaps to get a more accurate fix on this. And then, now what I'd like to be able to do is, as with Lightroom, is to move the one that I've already put down, but I can't do that, so I have to put new ones down. And yeah, that's quite good. Now I'm going to have some feathering, so I'll use this medium one, the middle one, and I'll make this bigger, and there's a lot of clicking that I'm having to do to actually achieve this. So now I want to move this down, and coming from the side is still okay, so on I go. Now I'm going to move this one over to the other side and move down a bit. Now I should be able to just go straight across, but it's going to be repeating now, isn't it? So I need to change this to a different place. Then I can get rid of the repetition, and there, we've done the job. So if we close that down, we can see that the rope has gone. So it's a bit more fiddly, and if you've got a larger area that you're trying to deal with, this restriction of having this little box is well, restricting. So we've looked at 4 local adjustment tools in Lightroom and 3 in Silkypix. I think the overall thing that I take from this is that yes, Silkypix does have local adjustment tools, but the two that are most equivalent to ones in Lightroom, the graduated filter and the circular filter, have less functionality in terms of what you can do to the area that you've chosen. The spotting tool is a bit more fiddly to use, and Lightroom's adjustment brush, there's no equivalent of at all in Silkypix. So that's it for now. Goodbye.